There we go. Okay, we are live. So thank you everyone for joining in today. What we're going to be talking about today is SimVox Pro, what it is, how it works, and how it can benefit your simulation center. So essentially, SimVox Pro is a smart speaker that you can pair up with any manikin, be it a low fidelity manikin, mid fidelity manikin, or even high fidelity manikin, to add communication training to that manikin. So essentially what SimVox does is it provides a voice for your manikin. So learners can ask questions about what's going on with the patient, and then the patient is able to understand and then respond back given the scenario that is being run. So the included hardware with SimVox is pretty straightforward. It is the combination of a smart speaker, a Bluetooth speaker, and an Android tablet. That Android tablet then is connected to the internet, which is then connected to the PCS servers that kind of drive all of the simulations. From there, you can start any one of the included 55 scenarios. Those scenarios range from acute care, outpatient care, mental health, women's health, pediatrics, gerontology. So you can choose any one of those scenarios, but what's really most popular is the ability for end users to go in and create your own custom scenarios as well. So you're not necessarily limited by what we provide. You can use the scenarios that you're already running on your mannequins to be able to incorporate them into SimVox and have SimVox play the voice of those scenarios as well. So we're going to jump into a live demonstration here in just a little bit, and I'll showcase how that functionality works to be able to go in and create your own custom scenarios as well. Before we do that, I'd also like to point out too, I've got two of my colleagues here on the call, Eric Bergan, Marcus Ancliffe. If you do have any questions that pop up during the presentation, please feel free to type into chat. They'll be monitoring the chat. And you can go in and they'll be able to answer your questions in real time. So, what are folks using SimVox for? Obviously, the way that the mannequins have been voiced historically have been from faculty playing the voice of the patient, SimTechs playing the voice of the patient, and one of the things that we've seen is having SimVox play the voice of the patient actually adds to the realism of the simulation. So there was a study that the University of Buffalo did earlier this year that kind of showcased learners actually find more realism when SimVox plays the voice of the patient as opposed to their faculty playing the voice of the patient. And that might not be surprising to any of you guys on the call. I know I've spoken to learners where they mention, hey, once I hear my professor playing the voice of the patient, they're kind of immediately taken out of the simulation, hey, that's my faculty member. Anyway, so that's obviously one area where folks are using SimVox. Another one is, kind of freeing up bandwidth for SimTechs to focus on other areas during the simulation. So no longer do they have to be playing the voice of the patient. SimVox can kind of handle that role for them as well. And then, of course, sometimes you're having to play pediatric scenarios or mental health scenarios, which can be extremely challenging for a SimTech to provide and play those in a realistic manner. SimVox is also able to model those types of conversations and have the patient respond back as you would expect. So probably enough of me talking about SimVox here. Let's go ahead and get into a demonstration so that you guys can see how SimVox actually works and how the communication kind of flows. So what I'm going to do is move over to my PCS tab here. So this is the user interface that you would see on a SimVox tablet. So when you're ready to start the simulation, you would see your SimVox here. You would see this start button, and you would see any of the assigned scenarios that you have for your SimVox. Right out of the box, just to keep things simple, there's only a few simulations assigned. But as I mentioned, there's over 55 different simulations that are included, so you can assign any one of those. What I'm going to start with here for this first case is kind of a really basic scenario, which is Valerie Miller. Some of you guys who have been following PCS over the years, you might have seen this case before, but it's a really good case just to kind of showcase what that basic medical interviewing looks like. We'll run some additional scenarios afterwards so you can kind of see the breadth of what we offer, and then we'll get into how you can go in and create your own custom scenarios as well. So when the simulation first starts off, what you're going to see is kind of this getting started message. This just reminds the users of some of the key controls during the simulation in case they forgot. So here's how you interview a patient, here's how you end the simulation, and then here's how you have a few additional controls during the simulation as well. I'm just going to click on OK, got it here, and then we'll see kind of our few key UI elements. On the left-hand side, I have my door notes. These are going to provide instructions to the learners on what their objectives for the scenarios are. In this case, you might have the learners take a look at the tablet so they can see the instructions, or a faculty member might read these out to the learner so that they know, hey, here's my objectives for this specific case. I can just go ahead and dismiss that, and then I see this kind of clear microphone button in front of me, which is telling me right now it's red, so my patient isn't listening. Once the learners are ready to start communicating with the patient, all that I need to do as a sim tech is simply press on this little button here. This will turn green, we'll hear a beep, and that just indicates that the patient is listening. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll start checking in with Valerie, see what's going on with her. Good morning, Valerie. My name is Nick, and I'll be taking care of you today. What brings you into the clinic?
Good morning, Nick. I'm here because of these terrible headaches I've been having.
Okay, well, tell me a little bit more about these headaches. Can you describe the pain for me? Is it sharp? Is it dull? How would you describe it?
It's a sharp pounding pain, and it's been getting worse. It's so bad, it's impacting my life.
Okay, and when do the headaches usually come on? Are they all day, or do they only come on during a certain time of day?
They come on randomly, and they last for 1 to 2 hours, but they impact my life daily.
Sure, totally understand. Anything that you can think of that makes the headaches better or worse?
I haven't noticed any triggers. The only thing that seems to help is resting in a dark, quiet room, but it's not a cure.
Okay. Does it radiate anywhere, or does it kind of stay in your head?
It stays in my head, but it starts on the right side, and sometimes it shifts to the left.
Okay. And then, I'm sorry, how long did you say the headaches usually last for?
They last for 1 to 2 hours, but they can happen 2 to 3 times per day.
Okay. And then, have you noticed any changes in your vision with headaches?
I've noticed that sometimes I have blurred vision, but it goes back to normal once the headache is over.
Okay. And then what about, have you thrown up at all?
I've thrown up twice 2 weeks ago. It was awful, but I did vomit.
Yeah, that does sound pretty bad.
It was.
So
I was in a lot of pain, and it just came up.
yeah. So I just muted her there, so she's no longer listening. But I just want to, recap a little bit of what we just saw there with Valerie. Obviously, she was happy to answer any of the questions that I had for her in a, nice, agreeable, and coherent manner. With our AI engine, a few things that I'd like to point out. First, obviously, nothing is scripted. So it's really up to the learners to identify what the best course of questioning is for their patient. And then the AI will be able to understand and then respond back accordingly to the scenario that's being presented. Also, of course, learners are going to ask their questions in their own ways. And so it really doesn't matter how the learner phrases their question, the patients will be able to understand and respond back appropriately. A lot of the times, of course, we get asked questions of how this compares to, your ChatGPTs, your Claudes, your Geminis of the world. And what I like to tell people is, there's a few key differentiators here between SimVox and the PCS cloud, which is kind of custom built for healthcare communication training versus some of the larger models that are out there. First off is in regards to latency. So the model that we have built for SimVox and for PCS, it's going to be a lot smaller than some of the models that you've probably had experience with ChatGPT, Google Gemini, those types. So it doesn't necessarily need to know every single thing under the sun and then respond back to it. So since it's a smaller model, we're able to have a much quicker response time. So the latency is a lot more natural and realistic, which kind of keeps the conversation flowing and makes it so that it feels like you're actually talking with someone versus, waiting 10 seconds for the reply to come in. Another element to that is going to be on standardization. So one of the real key aspects of healthcare simulation is going to be on standardization and making sure that one group of learners experiences the scenario the same as another group of learners. So we've made it so that the responses that learners can expect from one group of learners to the other are going to be very similar. So if we ask this patient about allergies, she's going to tell them that, she doesn't have any allergies for group A, and also she's going to tell for group B that she doesn't have any allergies as well. So standardization is another big element of it. And then finally, one of the things that I always like to point out here is, since our models are, a lot smaller, they don't have all of that, just kind of random knowledge that a ChatGPT type of model would have. And so if you were to ask Valerie here a question with relation to, what's your favorite chocolate chip cookie recipe? She's not going to necessarily rattle out every single ingredient necessary and step-by-step instructions. Instead, she's going to make a note of, I don't really have a favorite chocolate chip cookie recipe, or something along those lines. And so that comes into, a big part if a learner is using, medical jargon during the simulation. Some of those larger models will, kind of understand anything that the learner says and respond back. However, if we were to use certain medical jargon with Valerie here, she might not understand what we're saying and kind of ask to clarify, which is something that should be expected during an actual patient-provider type of interaction. So that's, just a few things I like to point out with, what kind of sets the PCS model apart from other models that are out there. So we could, of course, keep going with this simulation here, but we only have a limited amount of time. So I want to keep things moving and showcase a few other simulations as well. Before I do that, though, I do want to showcase a few other key controls during the simulation for SimVox. First off is the sim log. So during the simulation, everything is going to be transcribed, and everything that the learner says, that will be indicated by the stethoscope icon, and then everything that the patient responds with, that'll be indicated by this little avatar icon here. So faculty members, they'll be able to fully review the simulation log to see what was said during the simulation, if they needed to go back and review something that is available. Another note that I'd like to point out too, if you're pairing SimVox up with a lower fidelity manikin, you're able to add additional realism to those mannequins with the vital sign monitor. So you can actually add physiology and have that paired up with the communication as well. So that can have, kind of breathe new life into some of those lower fidelity mannequins that you might have sitting in the closet or, aren't using as much. So just wanted to point that out as well. Once we're done with the simulation, we can click on this little arrow icon up here in the top right. That will end the simulation. Once I do that, then I will get immediate feedback on how I performed. So by default, all of the simulations that we include with SimVox are going to have scoring criteria associated with medicine as well as nursing. But you're also fully free to come in here and customize the scoring criteria. So you're not necessarily limited to what we provide. You can fully adapt it to meet your own scoring rubrics as well. So this is going to be very, kind of quantitative in terms of, did I ask all of these kind of checklist type questions? and then I'll get a little green check if I did, and then I'll see an X here if I didn't ask or receive that information from the patient. And then if I scroll down here a little bit further, I'll get my overall score. And then I also have kind of my qualitative feedback on how my communication was with the patient. So that'll be both, hey, you used really good empathetic language, but also, here's how you can improve upon for next time. So that type of communication feedback is provided to the learners as well. So that's what a SimVox simulation looks like in a nutshell. What I'd like to do now is showcase a few other different types of scenarios that can be played on SimVox, starting with some of our mental health types of scenarios. So we know, obviously, that SimVox can handle some of those, kind of straightforward type simulations. But let's say I wanted to go in here and run a mental health type of scenario. How does SimVox handle those? Well, let's start with Nisha here. So Nisha is one of our mental health type scenarios. She's actually got 3 different variations where, one is opioid addiction, one is an alcohol addiction, and the other is suicidal ideation. I can go ahead and select her here. We'll start the scenario, and we'll kind of see what what that sounds like here. So we'll dismiss these messages. Hey, Nisha, what brings you in today?
You can fuck off.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just here trying to help. Could you tell me a little bit more about what's going on?
I'm just really in pain, okay? And I feel like shit. I just want to leave.
Okay. Well, what's going on? Why do you feel like shit?
I have a drug addiction problem. I don't know what else to do. Life is hard.
Okay. Yeah, I can imagine that can be pretty hard. What are you addicted to?
I'm addicted to opioids. I prefer fentanyl pills.
Okay. And what brought you into the hospital today?
I need help with my addiction problem. I need to stop using drugs.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that you came in, and it sounds like you're pretty open to getting treatment. Is that fair to say?
I guess so. I just want to feel better.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you came in, and we'll definitely be able to help you out with that. So stay with me here, and we'll get some treatment resources to you soon.
Whatever, just get me the medication.
So you can kind of get an idea there of what some of the mental health type scenarios can look like. With Nisha, obviously, she starts out, pretty aggressive with, some aggressive language there right off the bat, and then it's up to the learners to figure out what some of the better ways to kind of calm her down are, and then also, kind of build that relationship with her so that she's more agreeable to treatment. So that's Nisha. Another one that I wanted to showcase here is highlighting some of the additional voices that we've been able to build out. So just last month, we introduced our first scenario, that has speech pathology. And so now we're able to simulate voices that also have, like, slurred speech, for instance. And when we came out with that, we also introduced a scenario to tie along with it for a stroke scenario. So let me go ahead and start up George here to kind of showcase what that sounds like. So I've got George Callahan here. And I'm going to start this scenario so you can kind of get an idea of what voices with pathology might sound like. Hey, George, my name is Nick, and I'll be taking care of you today. What brings you in?
My students said my face looked funny,
Okay.
and another teacher got worried and drove me over here. I didn't really notice anything myself.
Okay. How did they say your face looked funny?
They said it looked weird, like it was drooping.
Okay. And have you ever had anything like this happen before?
No, nothing like this.
Okay. Have you noticed any inability to, keep your left or right arm raised up?
No, I haven't tried that.
Okay. Have you ever had a stroke before?
No.
So we'll just kind of pause it there. I just kind of wanted to showcase kind of what that speech pathology sounds like for you guys. But yeah, that's one of the things that we're really proud that the team has been working on for the last 6 to 12 months. Kind of bring this new voice engine into the fold, which has allowed us to do these types of speech pathologies. So the slurred speech was the first one here. And the hope is that we'll be able to release more in the future. So look forward to more information on that coming out. Now, I know we've only got 9 more minutes. So the other thing that I wanted to showcase here was, as I mentioned, SimVox, it includes 55 different scenarios. However, you also have the ability to go in and create your own custom scenarios as well. So for the majority of SimVox users, I would say that they are kind of creating their own custom scenarios so that they are basically taking the scenarios they're already running on their mannequins and you know, fine tuning them and building them into the PCS platform. So how does that look? So when you're going in and creating your own custom scenarios, you've got basically 55 different scenarios to start from or to choose from. And those are kind of your starting point. So let's say if you wanted to create a scenario around a headache, you could theoretically take the Valerie Miller scenario that we looked at earlier, copy that, and then begin to make changes to it to match up with the scenario that you want to be able to create. Or you could start with our Alex Adams scenario, which is just kind of a healthy routine physical if you just want kind of a blank slate to start with. So if you open up any one of these scenarios, then you'll have this little copy button down here in the bottom right. Once you click copy, then you can start making changes to the scenario and really customize pretty much everything under the sun. So what I'm going to do is, rather than copy one of these, I've got a number of patient scenarios already created. And I'm going to go just type in patient concept demo, and I've got one here that I've made changes to already. So if I go ahead and open this up, I can change the voice of the patient. That's done by selecting the avatar here. So we've got, we've got a number of different avatars now. I think it's close to 15 or so different avatars. Each one has their own corresponding voice. So select the avatar that kind of matches up with the voice style that you'd like to hear. And then once you do that, you can change the gender of the patient, set what language the patient speaks. So I should also mention too, we now support over 20 different languages with SimVox. Just off the top of my head, English, Spanish, French, German, Japanese, Korean, Turkish, a pretty wide range of languages supported. So certainly not limited to English at this point. You can also set your age of the patient and then your weight of the patient. Now, the majority of changes, those are going to take place in this patient concept field. So the patient concept is kind of the training documentation that you are providing for the AI to build responses from. So it all starts with this first field, which is your opening and your reason for your visit. In this case here, you'll notice that the input is in quotation marks. What this means is that every time somebody asks the patient, hey, what brings you in today? The patient is always going to respond with this very specific line. So it's going to respond word for word. And then in this case, if we ask the patient, what's going on, it'll respond with, my heart is racing really fast and I can't get it to slow down. So it'll say that basically the same every single time. Now, all of the other fields here, these other 14 different fields, this kind of builds the supporting information around the opening and the reason for the visit. And so, this is where you put all in your, supporting information, associated symptoms, allergies, medication lists, and so on. So the AI will use all of this information to build out the responses. Now, some of the things that I always tell users when it comes to, like best practices when building out a case, certainly you're going to want to fill all of this information in, because if you leave any of these fields blank, like substance use and history here is blank, for example, what you're doing is you're essentially giving creative liberty to the AI to kind of make something up. So you're kind of losing a little bit of standardization in that regard. So you might have it where one group of learners asks a question related to, do you do any recreational drugs? The patient might say no for group A, but then for group B, it says yes. And that might change the whole treatment plan and approach for the patient. So when you're going in and creating your own custom scenarios, it's just important to kind of fill all of this information out so that the AI has, everything that you want to be portrayed during the simulation. And then I'll also point out here, you have this little double pane option. This is a nice little feature where you can actually test your changes in real time. So rather than having to start a simulation from scratch, you do have the ability to, see how the patient would respond with your changes made in real time. So for example, do you have any allergies? Type that in. The patient says, yes, I'm allergic to cats. And we can come up here and say, oh, the patient is, I'm allergic to cats. Pretty straight, cut and dry. But, we could say no allergies. Once I type that in, that answer is locked in. If I refresh this, now the patient says, no, I don't have any allergies. So you can kind of see how the AI would respond to your changes in real time. Makes creating scenarios, a lot easier for testing purposes. And then lastly, I will just show here the assessment side of things. So as I showed with the Valerie Miller scenario, we get that feedback at the very end of the simulation. So this is kind of the scoring criteria that is going to be built for that case. You as a faculty member, instructor, you would be able to come in here, fully customize the scoring rubric. You can change the weighting of different action items. And also, fully rewrite basically all of these different categories to match up with the curriculum and the rubric that you guys use. So it can certainly be adapted to whatever scoring rubric that you have. So that is kind of SimVox in a nutshell. I know we're at the top of the hour and we only have 30 minutes scheduled, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Let me
Nick,
go
this
ahead.
is Nick. Can you hear me? This is Marcus.
Yeah, Marcus, go ahead.
Hey, we had a request for a pediatric scenario. Can you just kind of run through a pediatric patient?
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Let me go ahead and bring up a pediatric scenario here. So if I go over to the bundled patients here, I'm just trying to think of one of the pediatric. No, Mackenzie Sawyer, she's 21. Oh, I think Violet is a pediatric scenario. So Violet, she's 8 years old and she is in respiratory distress. Another interesting thing to note with Violet is that she's also in the room with her mother, Vesper. And so we can actually be asking questions of either Violet or the parent in this scenario. So let me go ahead and open this up and I will start the simulation here. Let me see. Hi, Violet. What brings you in today?
Hi, I'm sick.
Okay. And how are you sick? What does it feel like?
I have a fever and my chest hurts.
Okay.
I cough a lot.
Well, I'm really sorry to hear that, but I'm glad you came in and don't worry, we're gonna take care of you, okay?
Okay.
And Mom, are you there? Are you able to share any more information about what's going on with Violet?
Yes, I'm here. Violet has had a fever since yesterday, and she's been coughing a lot. She also feels sick, and her chest hurts.
Okay. Any other symptoms that you've noticed? Any lethargy or anything like that?
No, but she did wake up last night crying and sweating. She also had a hard time breathing.
Okay. Violet, is that true that you've been having a hard time breathing?
Yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Okay.
So you can kind of get the idea there with the pediatric scenario. So one of the really neat aspects of it is, of course, the way that Violet is going to communicate is obviously going to be reminiscent of a pediatric patient. But then you can also include the mother in the conversation as well, and get from her perspective what's going on with her daughter and what she's been noticing from an abnormality perspective. And then let me see here. I'm just going to check the chat and see if, okay, yeah, Lori, just saw your message there. So I'm glad we were able to showcase that for you guys. And then, yeah, that's pretty much everything that I had to showcase for today. So that's SimVox Pro. Thank you all for tuning in. If you're interested in learning more about SimVox, you can certainly go to our website, www.pcs.ai. We'd also love to set up, one-on-one demonstrations for you and your faculty. We can showcase how some of the scenarios that you've been running on your existing mannequins can easily be adapted to be run on SimVox, or answer any additional questions that you might have. The best way to get a hold of us is either through email, sales@PCS.AI, and one of our local representatives will reach out to you and be able to set something up. I can also type that email into the chat there. So please feel free to reach out there. We'll also follow up with this recording. So if you want to go back, take a look at anything, we'll be sending this recording out, and feel free to share that with any of your colleagues who might be interested to learn more about SimVox. So with that, I will sign it off, and thank you all for tuning in. All right. Bye-bye.